What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning The Dr. Vibe Show. As always, I like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. I'm also CEO and president of Express Your Vibe Communications and Coaching, and I host Epic Conversations, and the Dr. Vibe Show is the home of Epic Conversations. As always, on Tuesday nights, or most Tuesday nights at 8:30 p.m., we host a conversation for men and those who love them. And I thought, since it is, thank you, Patrick, for subscribing. Since it's the first day back to school for many young people, I thought, let's ask men how they're handling either their young ones going back to school or their older young ones back to school, or do they have any going back to school memories? So we have on the line tonight Ahmed Hazel, and he is a frequent contributor to the Dr. Vibe conversation. I also want to welcome Patrick A. Vanderbilt. Thank you, Patrick. I don't think you've come on the conversation before, but thank you for not only dropping by, but subscribing to the channel. Of course, Tachiata. Thank you so much as always, Tachi. And hey, don't feel bad. You can come in and join in on this conversation because you're an educator. So we'd like to get your perspective, if you're willing, on how the young people, the young male people you're dealing with are handling education. And also thank you to Evan also. So if anyone would like to join the conversation, just jump in. Just put a request and I'll have you put in the convo. So Ahmed, thanks again, as always, for dropping by. I know that you had some young men starting their first day of education, well, the new year of education today. What were your thoughts and how did you feel?
Well, actually, my young men, excuse me, went back to school on the 24th of August.
Wow. Okay. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
So yeah, they have started already. They're both athletes, so they're back involved with their sports. One of my sons had a cross country running meet today. My other son has football. They're both in school basically from 7 in the morning until about 6 in the evening. So it's a pretty long day for them.
Absolutely. Were there any different feelings that you had for them going back this year compared to other years?
Well, this year, I wanted to make it perfectly clear to them because I normally get them up at 6 a.m. And I wanted to make it clear to them that this year I wasn't waking them up in the morning, that it's their responsibility to make sure that they get themselves up so that I don't have to do it. And maybe I can get an extra 30 minutes of rest.
Can you compare the experiences of their first day going back now to in their earlier years? How have things changed as you, as a man, as a father, those first days going back to school now compared to many years ago?
Them in the past, it was always really exciting for me to have them go back. A lot of times I would worry about them. Are they being bullied? Are they comfortable where they are? And things like that. Are they eating properly? We would pack them lunches, but sometimes they wouldn't eat the lunch because they wanted to be like the other kids and eat school lunch. So it was in the past, it was always those issues. Now, I mean, they're big guys. I'm 6'2", and my youngest son is 14, and he's basically my size. So they're big guys, and they can handle themselves now, and they can pretty much make their own decisions on how they want to go. So they can take care of themselves now. So it's not as much worry.
Nice. How do you, as a father, what are your thoughts about the education system over the years, the education that your sons are getting?
Well, we started out in Baltimore City, having them educated in Baltimore City. And I thought that the education for Baltimore City was pretty good. But we moved to Baltimore County, and it's a totally different education system. It's a system that is more diverse. It's a system that it seems to be more beneficial. Today, they got personal laptops to do their homework on. So I think that it seems like a system that is more well funded.
Okay. Do you feel that the education system is serving young boys, young men as good as it could be?
I don't. I know that like the school that they attend, and generally in this area, they're heavy on sports. Academically, my kids are in what they call gifted and talented and advanced placement classes. So I think that they are getting maybe what the curriculum requires, the extent of the curriculum. But my view is that I've been, as a junior in college, studying biology. I've had advanced calculus, and I can tell you that in the modern world, I've never used calculus. I've never used trigonometry. I've never used algebra. I don't know the purpose of those subjects. I don't know if those subjects are that beneficial to someone trying to make it in this world, unless you're an engineer or something like that.
So as a father, have you ever, how can I say, confronted the education system in that area, saying that what you're teaching my sons doesn't have any relevance for their future?
No, I think that's like trying to attack Rome. You know, I think that I mean, the only thing that I can do is educate them when they come home. I make sure that I provide motivation for them on the way to school, talking to them. I try to find topics that I can cover in 10 minutes on a drive to school that can be motivating to them and set their day straight. And then when they come home, we have time to talk about issues or concerns. I try to throw in some history that's beneficial to them and their identity. But as far as the confrontation of the system, yeah, that's a totally different animal right there.
So this is interesting, though. Does it seem that there are things that you have concern about? And do you know any other fathers or caregivers out there, male caregivers, that have contested what their young people are being taught?
I think that I have several friends. One is an engineer that, the whole advanced mathematics, he really likes that. He's really strong in that area. So he really works with his son on a lot of advanced mathematics. He does a lot of ordnance work with the military. So he has to know that type of that system. So I haven't really heard any males really complaining about the curriculum. My view tends to be a little more identity related. Do you know who you are, where you come from, where you're going?
So if that's your concern of the foundations you want, is there a reason why you haven't pushed the education system to teach that?
I guess I guess I'm picking my battles, and focusing more so on what I can add to them, because when they go off to college, they're going to be confronted with the same system. So not only would I have to change the high school system, I would have to change the entire academic system for the entire country. So for me, I just take the time to educate them at home as much as I can, and I let the system be where it may.
I got a point here from Evan saying, I believe any good father must not send kids to a school to get brainwashed to be a, okay, I guess brainwash. I'll leave it at that. I don't understand the other part. So, so in your group that you associate with fathers or men who are caregivers for younger people, you basically have taken the thought process to push against the school system is too big of a battle. We'll just do what we can at home.
Yeah. So understanding that to his point, understanding the brainwashing part. Like I said, I do what I can to add to what they are already learning. Brainwashing, that's interesting because I believe I know where his point is coming from. And one side of me, I could agree with what he's saying. The other side of me, I look at the brainwashing part as do they know their identity? They may be being taught skills that I might believe is useless. But I could believe that it's useless now. And then depending on one of their majors, it could be a prerequisite for that major. So I know that I haven't used those skills in my entire life. I've never needed to calculate, the area of a triangle. But that doesn't mean that they might not be in a space where that information isn't useful to them.
Okay.
So that's it's difficult though,
I do understand, and it's interesting here that Patrick is saying that technically speaking, brainwashing doesn't happen without drugs, sleep deprivation, etc. It would be great if people don't use the word now. Conditioning is another thing. So, as a father, do you feel the education system? And Patrick, if you want to jump in, and Tachi, you're an educator, would like to know: do you feel that the education system is brainwashing our boys? Not just your boys, but just young boys in particular.
Wow. I mean, we've really gotten deep tonight already, huh?
You know how I roll. You know. And we got Patrick jumping in. You don't know what's going on, Patrick. I tried to get you in the conversation. For some reason, it's not happening. I will try again. Okay, I think we're going to have Patrick coming in now. So, yep, Tachi, you can certainly, I got a seat open for you, certainly. And we're specifically talking about the kids here, but, especially boys, what's going on here. So let's
Tachi, come on in and help me.
Well, I think Patrick has raised a good bonfire here. So we're just seeing if Patrick's going to join us here. Would appreciate him coming on the conversation.
Hey, Patrick.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Great.
Hey, Patrick, how are you?
Good so far. How are you? How's your day been going so far?
I'm blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles and a solution for someone's problem. And happy to see that you joined the conversation because you were saying, "Oh, I'm just hanging out," but you jumped in, so I appreciate that. What do you have to share on this subject as a man? At the education system?
Yeah, I have been I've been researching human psychology for the last probably 10 to 15 years. So I actually created a new model of psychology that explains why we do the things we do a little bit better than what we had before. And I have done, some research about just brainwashing versus conditioning and things like that. Now, brainwashing, again, it takes, I think it was 11 different pieces to be considered brainwashing, and it's actually pretty hardcore, so to say. Now, conditioning is a different thing, because conditioning can happen by just repeating something. And I do think that there is a certain element of conditioning in school, because if you even think about, how school is set up, they're being rewarded when they're doing the right thing and they're regurgitating information in the right way that is wanted. And they're being punished with bad grades if they don't. So that has an emotional consequence. Then you take into the equation that we're dealing with authorities. So teachers are authorities, and they're seen as authorities. Now if you take all of this and you put it together, and there are obviously more elements that go into it, then it does become somewhat something where we have to ask ourselves, okay, so now I'm sending my kid there for about 6 to 7 hours. I don't know how long it is nowadays, during a day. The teachers are telling them one thing. Sometimes it's pretty straightforward. Sometimes it's things that you might not agree with, but they're being taught that continuously every single day. Now, teachers only have a certain amount of time that they can dedicate the kids. So in between, the blind are kind of leading the blind. Kids learn by observation, and they don't discern who they're observing. And unfortunately, with younger kids, of course, we know that there's not that wisdom or that experience. So there's a lot that goes into that. So I can just always say, I take my hat off for Ahmet, because it's crazy what parents have to be able to do nowadays. And I have a lot of respect for that, because if you want to keep close to your kids, and if you want to have some influence on it, it does take energy, and it does take time, and it does take self-reflection as well from the parents. So I have a lot of respect for parents nowadays.
And fully understood. One of the things that ran in my mind as I was, and it's funny because I didn't have a conversation piece till this afternoon, and all of a sudden it hit me. Hey, it's the first day of school for many people, for young kids. What are guys having to say about this? Because, ladies seem to be fully engaged, etc. Which brings me to a question. Do men care as much about the school thing as the ladies do, or is it a situational piece?
It's a good question.
Yeah, and I think that because the ladies are generally seen as the caregivers, the securers of the home, that the man is designed to go out and bring the furs back, where the woman stays at home and is the caregiver for the children to make sure that their schooling is in place and everything like that. I think that has been our model for a very, very long time. For me and my family, it's been different, because my wife and I have always been business owners and very active in our children's schooling. So, all of the teachers know me, all of the kids know me, so it's been one of those types of things. one of the things that I will address back to Patrick, though, is as far as the conditioning, what I've seen that's been in my face is with my sons. I think that the school system teaches do your work, don't talk to anyone else, don't share any answers, don't collaborate in class. And I find that that is totally against the way the real world works.
Oh yeah, you're right. Especially the collaboration part, for sure. That's actually there are actually a couple of really interesting people that did some research on that, and there are even some kind of experimental schools going on now where the collaboration is actually more emphasized and the competition is going more into the background, and they have really good results so far, and the kids are a lot more successful in the work life as well. But in terms of what you were asking before, it's I think one part of it is obviously that a lot of dads are still very busy with work. And then so it needs a lot of time management for fathers to really get involved in their kids' education and life in that manner. And women are just like the wives still are more around, and have a closer connection to kids. That being said, I think it's very important that dads get more involved and that dads notice that their own self-development actually has something to do with that. We always see these characters on TV or wherever, when there is a dad that is just sitting down with his kid and is just talking about something. And I wonder how many times that still happens, where they have a heart-to-heart. Not only because something negative just happened, but because he just takes an interest in his kid and he wants to know, where are you at? What's going on in school? What's going on in your life? What moves you? Can I help you with anything? So like a real conversation and a deep conversation. And that is just something that, you have to do that consciously and you have to put an effort into doing it. And it's difficult nowadays because life is so fast and so demanding on a lot of fathers.
And Patrick, you bring up a really good point because that was swirling around in my mind. And I just sent out this question on my Twitter timeline. How many men are going to introduce themselves to their kid's teacher this year? And I should put a caveat to that and just introduce them on a neutral circumstance. And what I mean by that is a lot of times parents introduce themselves to their kid's teacher when something not good happens.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And my point is, how many will take the time to introduce them on a neutral event like a PTA night?
That's true.
Well, what's funny is with my son's school, you have to walk up to the front door, ring the bell. They have cameras watching you. And once they check you out, they allow you access in. But then you have to go straight to the office. You have to have a driver's license. If you don't have a driver's license or some type of photo ID, whatever you're there for is going to be nullified. But when I go to my kid's school, the principal, the office staff, they're always like, that's Mr. Hazel. He doesn't need an ID. We know who he's here for, and we know both of his kids. So I feel really good that I can come in and I don't even need to present ID.
Oh yeah, that's great. So, Amit, do you think how do you see it? Like, is it difficult in terms of taking school into consideration to still build, have that quality time and talk to your kids?
I get them, like I said, that little short morning time. I get to pre-frame them before school.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Afterwards, like we had a conversation with Dr. Vibe last night, and after the conversation, Danielle was the guest, and some of the ideas that she brought up during the conversation made me want to go to my sons and have like a brief meeting before bedtime to say, what is it that I can do to better support you during your school year? Is there anything that I can do? And
nice.
They're like, no, you already do everything. So
that's good to hear.
Yeah.
That's good. And joining our conversation, an esteemed educator and live streamer herself, Tatiana.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm fine. How
Hey,
are
Tachi.
you? Hello.
Great.
How's everybody doing?
Doing fine.
Wonderful.
Last enjoying the conversation. And Tachi, let me ask you through your eyes, especially when it comes to the education of young men.
Mm-hmm.
How are they handling it? Because the education you're giving them, most of the time their parents are probably not as involved as with younger kids. Or are
they really can't be. Whereas, when they're K through 12, you can ask for report cards and things. You have to, when they're in college, they have to get permission. So parents, usually children comply, but the parents just can't call you and say, oh, I want to know how they're doing, because I can't discuss that with them, because for all intents and purposes, they're adults. And because of those FERPA rules now, I can't do that, So there's that difference.
Okay. How do you over your years of education, how do you feel the education system is treating and handling young men?
Not well. And this is something, I shouldn't say not well, but not in the way in which they could. Part of the thing is they treat everyone in the public school system anyway, from what I've observed, in a standard sense, from testing to the way they expect them to learn things. And even though we all know pedagogically, everybody learns differently, that's not the way the system tends to be set up. It's set up like a factory, for lack of a better term, where we are manufacturing people to be good members of society. We only have enough money for method X, and if you can't learn by method X, too damn bad for you. And so then what ends up happening is, and I had put in the side that I think Ahmed knows that I was a professor at Morgan before I came down here. And we had a lot of, because of the mission of Morgan, which is like a lot of HBCUs where whosoever shall come to be educated, we try to do so. And so we had an awful lot of students from the Baltimore City public schools, and I could see where there were gaps. And so this is going back to, are they failing young men? Is the system failing young men? Yes, because they're not realizing that there are different ways that boys and girls learn. There are different ways that people in general learn, that children in general learn, and they're trying to force a standard block into a round hole for everyone. And so and this is just what I've observed. Plus I'm in an organization that's like full of educators. And so I've just observed this because they've been so beholden to, especially here in Florida, this whole testing nonsense, even though they're getting away from it a little bit, but that's all they focus on. So if you can't learn in a certain amount of time what they need you to learn, not only is it not good for you, but the school is also penalized with a failing grade. And so in that whole shuffle of, we're trying to make sure that we maintain whatever monies we can get from the government, because we don't have any of our own districting wise, then you get all these students that get lost in the shuffle because of that. The children are the ones that suffer, or the students.
And one thing to that point is, we had a situation with my 16-year-old. He's a senior this year, but he started school when he was 3. So we wanted to have him reclassified as an 11th grader again, so that he would have more time to develop in his sports. but the school said that there was no way that they were going to let him reclassify when he has an 1170 on his SAT and he's never been in danger of failing, and they have kids that are failing that they're trying to push through the system. So it was going to be no way. They were just like, you might as well forget about that because we're not going to let that happen.
Mhm.
Hey, I want to get back to the point about how either much or how little men are engaged in the education system. Because I just have this feeling that, again, unless it's something drastic that happens at school,
Yeah, we're not.
they're not there.
Yeah, we're not.
Mhm.
And it's a
Yeah.
serious situation. And let me ask, in each one of your cases, when you were younger, you're still young, but I'm saying younger, were your fathers engaged in the education system?
No.
Somewhat, but probably more on the no side, I'd say.
Okay, let's start with the positive first. Tatsi's shaking her head. Talk about, you're saying your father was engaged when it came to the education system.
You forget I'm Nigerian.
I know.
Nigerian
I know where you're at. I know where you're at.
Too engaged, in my opinion, sometimes, to the point where he came up to school when I was in high school and changed my entire schedule because I didn't have enough math and science, in his opinion. So that was I was like, are you kidding me? You really came up here to change? And by the way, he didn't live in the US. He lived in Nigeria. But he came on one of his trips and said, where's the math and science? I can't just be speaking Spanish all day. We're going to school. And he went and said, she's going to be a doctor. Therefore, she needs to have maths and science. And I said, I never said I was good. But did I say anything? I just sat there and let him change everything. So I think it's very, very cultural as well. Because of the fact of being Nigerian, and you can probably attest to this too, Dr. Vibe, because of being Jamaican, that there is a heavy emphasis on how well you do. In fact, I did an interview with a lot of Jamaican people when we were putting together a Caribbean issue of a magazine, and a lot of them said that schooling, where you went to school, defines you.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing in Africa.
Yeah.
The same thing. If you went to such and such government school, such and such private school. So schooling is like the most important thing. So by virtue of that being the case, men by default tend to be involved in that. And that's not in every case. I'm making a blanket case here. But for the most part, everyone that I know that, that has African parents or Caribbean parents, somehow both the mothers and the fathers were involved. And again, that's not every case. But yes, my father was, when he was in the States, found a way to come up to my school somehow to determine if I was taking the right things.
Wow. Before we get to Patrick and Ahmed, I had a double because I'm of Jamaican heritage, plus my dad was a teacher.
Oh.
And I always like to share, and some people may or may not know, my dad was a teacher in the same public school, in the same classroom for 32 years.
Wow.
So
Oh, wow.
one of the things, and yeah, he was a dedicated teacher, because when he retired, he had over 300 sick days.
He never took off.
Exactly, right? So here, I'll give you a very interesting story of how engaged he was in my education. Grade 8, junior high, graduating. Outdoor ceremony, front lawn of my junior high school. The Minister of Education of Ontario at that time awards me with a proficiency award, meaning excellence in sports and athletics. Coming off the stage. First person I see is my dad. What is the first thing you think my dad said? What would the first thing you think a father would say?
Congratulations.
Yes. The first thing my dad says is that you're going to university. And I said, Dad, I haven't even touched high school yet. Starting with engaged, you're going to university. So I piggyback on what Tachi says. I just wanted to say that that's the engagement I had on the value of education. And even up to today, my dad's still alive. Where he went to school in Montego Bay, Jamaica, Cornwall College, they still have a very high prestige.
Mm-hmm.
They have their Cornwall College Old Boys Association, and they carry themselves in a certain way. I'll just leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
So very, very committed to education. So now let's go to the other side of the ping pong table. Let's talk about Patrick and Ahmed's father's experiences in the education system. So Patrick, you start off.
Well, I think my dad was just very busy. So that's, goes a little bit into that direction also of him taking care of other things, really. And he was interested. I mean, it was not like he was disinterested, and he also made sure that I go to the best schools that he could possibly get me into. But at the same time, it was also something where he didn't constantly nag me about it, and he wasn't constantly asking about it. So it was it was somewhat balanced, but on the other hand, a little bit more engagement might not have been bad. And at the same time, I had the ability to just kind of make up my own mind and had, it was just a different school experience for me all around, because I was always that kid that asked the questions why in the situations when the teachers didn't want to hear them. And
you seem like that.
And I was very interested. It was just, like a lot of times, teachers don't have the time or don't have the nerves to actually answer those questions. So then you just need to know it, period. And that's it, So for example, English, I got my rudimentary English in school when I was in Germany, by the way. So I went through the German system, and but my real English really came from watching World Sport News. And so I was watching CNN, and I was also playing basketball a lot. So when I was playing basketball, I was invited to like 2-week, 4-week long basketball camps where we had NBA players and coaches come over to train with us. So I had to speak English, so I got more from real life, really. And then I came across really good friends, not from school, but through other means. And they just motivated me to read a lot. So I was lucky that, I got a lot of education really outside of school. And I wish I would have had a more engaged education, and maybe also a little bit of more like a general understanding from my dad, like which place should school have, because I think that's also another thing, that we have a lot of extremes in one or the other direction, but we have very little balance. Either parents are overly engaged or they're not engaged at all. And then in between, there's a whole lot of nothing, when the balance would really be good, And so I think with me, I mean, it turned out fairly well, but it's also difficult to hypothesize, what would have been if he would have been more engaged. So I don't know.
Okay.
But it worked out.
That's the most important thing. You got through. Ahmed, how much of involvement, if any, did your father have in education, your education?
It's really unique, because as I'm sitting here listening and thinking and processing in my head, I'm really coming to the awareness of how much I have followed in the path that my dad directed me in. When I would, because he and my mother were separated, when I would go to his house on the weekend, I would like to, as a young kid of 8 or 9 years old, I want to go to the park. I want to eat ice cream. I want to have fun. And he's like, we're going to go on an exciting trip this weekend. And I'm like, where are we going to go? And he's like, the Library of Congress in DC. I was like, oh God, not again, but that's where he and I would hang out. And his process was, how you doing in school? Fine. He's like, okay, good. Learn that. But this is more important, that you self-educate, that you understand your identity, your roots, where you come from, how to set up a business, how to run that business, what it means about leadership. So that was more of my father's focus instead of formal academics.
Fair enough. Tachi, do you want to add anything to the comments that either Patrick or Ahmed have given?
They're good. I would say that it's interesting because all of our comments, what we all said, demonstrates that parents had a hand in different ways in terms of shaping our educational development and our development in general. But in a way, depending on who you are, it can get undone once you get to school because they try to force you into one way of doing things. So you heard 4 different stories basically, but and that's 4 different individuals who learn differently, who may appreciate some of the same things and some different things based on the way our parents reared us educationally. But then they want you to learn one way of doing things once you get to school. Now, granted, it's a difficult job, and this is why I teach on the college level, because I haven't the patience for K through 12, and I know this. I could take you for after school programs and dance, and that's it. And you go on home. And I know that's me. That's why I do college. I could not do the other way around. So I appreciate that it's a very difficult job, and there's a lot of politics in terms of the way it's being done. But at the same time, while we're fighting over the political aspects of that, young men are suffering, young women are suffering in school. But, this is the funny thing. I think I was watching, who was it? It was Rashim's stream. And I think it was she that was had I can't remember who it was. Everybody's blurred together now, but somebody had a stream, a really good stream with someone that was a former principal, and a really great educator. And he said that schools, the way that they're made, American schools are made for girls.
Yeah, just to interrupt that's very interesting because when I had the honor and privilege of hosting a weekly manhood show with Glenn Barker from the Mankind Project in Chicago and Dr. Marvin Thompson, they had the same thought process. Wait a minute, that was you, Marvin Thompson. That was you, wasn't it? I don't know if it was me, but I know Rashim had Marvin Thompson on recently. I've had Marvin on a lot. And him and Glenn Barker say that the education system is reared to women.
Unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily help us later on in life in terms of opportunity, but here, it's an interesting thought process.
Just quickly, I gotta leave.
Okay.
So thank you so much for the great conversation, and I hope there's going to be a way to watch the rest of this later, Dr. Vibe.
It will. I'll be reposting it within the week on my site.
Sounds good.
So definitely, thanks for jumping in. I appreciate it.
I'll check that out.
Thank you, Patrick.
Bye, Patrick.
Well, thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
That's good stuff. So, okay, so just before we get back on here, men's rights have been talking about that forever. They're shutting down sports programs and putting boys in Ritalin. So talk a bit more about this, Tachi, and also, well, we'll get Tachi. I'll come back to Tachi. Ahmed, do you feel that is correct? Is the education system geared for women?
Totally.
Why?
Because number one, I think that we need more male teachers. Number one. The second point is the way that I think that females and males learn, they learn differently. And I think that younger males learn through activity. And the school system is designed to have you sitting for very long periods of time. And it was that way when I came through the school system. Again, it's like, sit here, and write this down. And there will be times that I'm sitting and my mind is wandering all over the place, but the girls in the class, they're constantly writing away. I think that I don't know if this is true, but it's my belief that the girls will have higher writing skills and grades on their test as it relates to boys. And I think that that's what the school system promotes. Just sit here and write this and study this and listen to this, whereas young men like to be active.
I think what I'm going to do is I'm scheduled to have Dr. Thompson on in the next week or two. I'm going to have him talk about the education and definitely hone in on about this issue about, is the education system favoring girls or women? But Tachi, do you see that even at the level that you do education at?
To an extent. Okay, so let me talk about the way I operate. Obviously it's scaffolded where what you learn is supposed to build from year to year to year, all the way up through college, even though there is a big disconnect and a big gap between senior year of college and senior year of high school and freshman year of college. So there needs to be a better connect, but I definitely do see that. I, for one, don't have time to entertain anybody's activity levels and what. All I need you to get this and to understand what this is. The time for me to have addressed all of that would have been in K through 12.
I agree.
So what happens is when you don't address that, and then you get to me and all of these issues, I don't have time to deal with that. Just like I don't have time to sit there and teach somebody how to write. I'm not an English teacher, and I'm not an English professor. Now I can't let things go because communication is still, English is still communication. But at the same time, I don't have time to correct all these things that you should have gotten somewhere down the line. So, then you can point the finger at us and like, all right, well, why is this person here if they're not ready? Oh, I can answer that. Money. Right. That's the big thing. They will find a way to accept you if it means that I can get tuition dollars. Right. Bottom line, especially at institutions that are solely tuition sponsored. No problem. So then you're sticking us. I don't want to say it like that. Now we have this issue of students that are not prepared, students who are taught one way of doing things, whose needs are not taken into account in terms of this. And we have to then deal with it. But here's the thing. Here are two things about this whole thing. I do agree. I think that definitely the system is aimed towards what is thought to be traditional roles of boys and girls. Okay. However, at some point, you need to learn that you can't just run around all the time, and you need to learn to sit the hell down, and you need to learn self-restraint. You need to learn that you don't need to talk all the time. Sometimes you need to. These are things that because if this were the case, and I hate to say, this is an American thing, but here we go. Even though boys in other countries certainly want to run around and certainly want to do some other things, look and see if they, and it's probably because of consequences. that come home with a C and see what happens. I'm sure that's because of the consequences thing. So you can point to that as a thing, but you can then look at other countries where that's not the case, where boys are doing equally as well. That doesn't mean that the system is perfect, but it's like the way that it's dealt with, I suppose, in terms of what the outcome is. And then on the other end of that, once you look at this, when you look at in terms of, so does that schooling being geared towards girls or women, has that done anything when we're still making less when we get out, when we're still not considered fully equals in the workplace? So what the hell good has that done? So even though it's designed with women in mind, I thought education was supposed to get you somewhere. And so that's a non sequitur, because it's not if we're not being treated equally. So at some point, and I'm not saying it's as serious as this, but at some point it's almost like when Trump says, well, I've been discriminated against too, because they're not, whatever he said about voting fairly for me or allowing, I'm like, okay, rolling my eyes. Now, this is not the same extent. That's extreme. But at some point, I'm like, all right, there needs to be further study to fix the issues. Because I do agree. I think that it's the education system is designed with girls in mind, or at least the stereotypical idea of what girls do and what boys do. But at the same time, the point is the end result. What the hell good is it doing when it's not equal when you get out?
Good points. And I think that to your point, Tachi, I think that I agree with what you're saying. I think that the object, though, is to emasculate the young men and then not provide the opportunity to the females.
How are they? Well, explain to me what you mean by emasculate. How are they being emasculated?
Well, for an instance, I know that when I was coming through school, that I had all female teachers. I never had a male teacher until 10th grade. And the female teachers, just the way that they taught, the way that they communicated, the way that they provided guidance, it wasn't, it didn't feel like I was given authority as a young man. It felt like I was being pushed down. Like, go ahead.
So maybe agency is a better word than authority, because you're a child. You don't have any authority in a grown person's classroom. But agency, the ability to grow and the ability to think for oneself and kind of speak on one's behalf, that I can see. Not necessarily authority in a situation like that.
Authority in my maleness. Authority to say,
okay,
be strong. I'm a male.
So, well, here's the thing. You can blame the system for that, because what is teaching seen as? A female profession. And it doesn't pay very well. And so that's probably one of the reasons there's a hard time attracting men to the profession. So traditionally, the professions that paid less were done by what? So you look at nursing, even though, nurses make a lot, not in comparison to doctors, okay? They do basically the same thing as doctors in a lot of cases. So, when you look at that, that's why. So it's a broken system that teaches that these are women's professions, and a real man is not going to get involved with that you need to do something else. And so there's no incentive for a young man to become a teacher. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but still, by and large, it's still viewed as a woman's profession. And so you don't have big recruitment efforts that I'm aware of anyway, to draw young men into the profession to, so that somebody like you would have benefited from a young male teacher that would have provided mentorship, but not at, whatever they were paying probably.
Yeah.
So that's a systemic thing.
So let me just interrupt you then, Tachi. If this is something that I've heard a lot, And I think that this has to be going on in a man's head, that when okay, let's talk about if he brings his young son into the classroom, he's not seeing that many male teachers in there. I don't hear a lot of men bringing this up as an issue. The only area I do see it being brought up is, hey, Durham, thanks for jumping in. The being brought as an issue is in the African American and African Canadian areas where they say there's a lack of Black teachers in the school system. But when I see the general populace of men outside of the people of color, I don't hear this being talked a lot. Do you know if it's discussed a lot? Yes or no?
I would say, like you were saying, in the Black communities, you tend to hear that because of the need for the mentorship for young African-American males, for young Black males in general, there's that need of mentorship. So you hear those conversations taking place in the Black community or Black communities, because we're not a monolith.
Right.
But overall, that's not a conversation that I've heard a lot. And again, I'm not in K through 12. I'm not in educational leadership. So that's not a conversation that I would be privy to. So I can't say for sure that it's not happening. I do know that those conversations consistently take place in the Black community. But the point is, what's being done about it? At the end of the day, we're constantly expected to do things out of the kindness of our hearts for the good of humanity, and you should. But should you starve at the same time? So depending on what school system you're in, the pay can be, if you're in New York City, the pay could be, decent. But again, you're in New York. You need, that cost of living. But if you're someplace else, it could be not so good. And so then it's like a sacrifice that you're making in order to do that. And then what ends up happening is you have teachers who end up doing it who may not necessarily be happy about making that sacrifice, and it ends up affecting the children that they teach or the students that they teach.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to jump on here, and I don't know if Brian or Mike, and again, I don't know Mike's background, but I know Brian and Evan's background. Brian or Evan, if you have younger kids in the school system, do you get engaged with their teachers, with the school system? Just want to know. You don't have to answer, but I want to get as many perspectives. Brian, that's great. Brian, are you able to come on? Because I'd like to get your perspective.
Brian should come on. I should get on.
I could jump out.
No, we got seats. If people want to come in, just tell me or make the request. And I'd like you to come in, but I'd like to get as wide a perspective as possible. Patrick was really great, giving perspective from someone who is not of color. Ahmed and Evan, I don't have my young kids are old now. I know you don't have your young kids, but when you did have your kids around, Evan, were you engaged in the school system? I'm working, but I can come briefly. I'd love you to come on, Brian. I'll bring you in right now because we all appreciate your thoughts. So Brian, look forward to you coming in if you can. And Durham Skywriter, thanks for jumping in. Social Birdie, thank you so much for jumping in and joining the conversation. I really appreciate it because I know Brian has a few kids and would like to know about how engaged he is in the school system as a father. So let's see if we can get Brian coming in to the conversation here. This is really good, folks. Really enjoying the conversation here. Quality people. Brian's loading. Hey, Brian, how are you?
Good.
I need you to tilt your camera a little bit up because we can't see the top of your head. There we go. Better. Getting a little bit of echo on your end.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Turn speakers away. How's that? Can you hear me?
I'm just concerned about when I talk, I'm hearing echo on your end.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You got your buds, or you want to turn the speakers down, that'd be great. If you can still hear us.
I'll try to turn the speakers down.
Okay. Still getting it.
I can try to plug in my headphones.
is all such a process, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is. Plug it, get the listen to the feedback, get the headphones, plug them in, and hopefully get rid of the feedback or the echoing. You can find the plug-in. Yes.
How's that?
Beautiful. Can you hear us?
I gotta turn up my volume now. There we go. Try 6. There we go.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. No echo. Fantastic. Thanks for jumping in the conversation. Brian, how engaged are you as a father to your kids' schooling?
How into it am I?
How engaged are you into their education, into the school system in your area?
I'm not like most parents around this Montgomery County area. I'm in kind of Bethesda, Maryland, very extremely wealthy area, like Bethesda, Potomac, Montgomery County. My wife and I call the parents around here helicopter parents.
Okay.
You know, they're involved with everything. They're like your traditional, rich white parents that they just, they will go and help tell the teachers how they need to teach and what they want their kids to learn. I'm involved. I like to be involved. I like to get to know. I go to all the parent teacher conferences. I go to the like next week there's a back to school, like a parent, go around and introduce the parents to the teachers. And I sit in all those. I make sure I introduce myself to the parent, make sure they know that I'm the parent of this particular kid. I show the picture. I'm like, this is mine, because my kids don't look like me, because my wife is African American. So I want to make sure they connect that just because I'm white doesn't mean, I got some brown kids. And so I like to make sure, I also get their emails. I like to email them so that I like there to be some connection with all those teachers, so they know they have me in their mind when they're talking to my kid. Like, this is not like just this lone kid out there. I think that's important, because then kind of puts a kid into a context of a family. I feel like it's good for parents or for teachers to understand, to kind of see that whole picture. Like, this is, and then they can come to me if there's an issue with my kid. Like, they know who I am. They have my email, and we can talk about whatever issue might come up.
And thanks for sharing that, Mike. And I think also to you, in a situation that you're married to an African American woman, I think that's even a more interesting situation, that you're taking engagement very important as a father to your kids, because, as I think was mentioned earlier, or something that a long time ago, they're going to learn from you. You're going to be, they're going to duplicate, or at least use it as the foundation, what you're showing your involvement in the education system. And I'm speaking that they will have kids, and that's sort of the environment that you're bringing to them. Were you raised in that environment? Was your father engaged in your education?
My mother was very engaged in my education. My dad was very busy all the time. He was a healthcare executive, so he would come home late at nights. He was very interested. I'd see him every night, but he was very interested and asked me questions about my education. He wasn't the one to typically go to the parent teacher kind of stuff. He would come to, and the other issue is I went away to school. I was at a boarding school like across the country, so they couldn't really come to things. Actually, now that I think about it, I went to 3 different high schools. Freshman year was like a local high school, but then sophomore, junior, senior year was like across the country, and nobody came visit me. Very seldom.
So and I just want to take this a little further. In the environment that you just shared with us, with the audience, that you didn't really have your parents around, what made you become so engaged as a father in your kids' education that you didn't have that growing up per se?
Good question. These deep questions.
Dr. Vibe.
That's a good question. That's a good question. The people that were involved in my life, in my I went to a boarding school, a boarding school, and so the education was my life. It's like I couldn't leave school. It was very the education was work, was recreation. It was all one. It was all the same. It was like when we got off school, we went. It was like a college campus. You know, you go to the dorms and then you hang out in dorms and you have a study hall. The teachers were the dorm, you know, parents or whatever, and you know, the teachers were the after school, you know, recreation, the sports people, the sports directors, and so it was all kind of together. So even though my parents weren't directly involved with me and my education, everyone else was around. So I've just kind of continued that. Like, I need to be involved in my kids' education because all the adults around me were very involved, extremely involved in my education because they kind of raised me when I was in high school. You know.
Right. Ahmed, Tachi, is there anything you want to add on or comment to what Brian has shared with us?
No, not really.
It's an unusual upbringing, I know.
Yeah.
But Brian, I didn't know that you were in Bethesda. I worked at Old Georgetown and Cedar for about 10 years.
Oh yeah, Old Georgetown. Yep. Aceta, you said?
It's Cedar, Old Georgetown and Cedar Lane.
Oh, Cedar Lane. Oh, very
Yeah.
cool. Yep. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I used to live right off Cedar Lane.
Yeah.
I go running around there. Like I have a running club every Thursday night.
Wow.
Brian, where do you find time? I just like like you just
What do you
Like-
mean?
you should write. There's a book many years ago called Maximize the Moment. I think you should have authored that book.
Why do you say that?
That's a comment because you've got so much stuff going on as a father, as a business owner, etc., and you make the time to maximize your moments, and I really respect that.
Thank you. Yeah, I believe in, like, you know, once you once you figure out what you love to do. My wife gives me so much freedom too. Like, you have to have a supportive spouse with this process. Like, we give each other, we have our own sets of friends, we have our own interests. I'm into bluegrass. She doesn't like bluegrass at all. She's R&B and, you know, and that kind of. I like R&B myself. I work with a blues and jazz club, so it's like R&B all day.
Right.
But bluegrass is my thing. I play banjo, guitar, mandolin, and she'll, you know, put up with it and come. You know, she won't kick me out of the room when I'm playing that music. She gives me total freedom. Like, I really love that totally. Like, and I'll go out with my friends to that concert. I will go. We'll have a jam session here on Tuesdays nights, and she'll like be in the bedroom and not, you know, stay away from us. So it's like, you know, and then I love running. I found out I fell in love with running when I had my college class reunion. We all got together and started working out, and we had this big, you know, a big running. So I've been running ever since 2007. And so I started a running club because I didn't want to have to drive anywhere to go run. I want people to come to me and make it easy on me. And so I started a running club in the, you know, like at the corner of my house, and then I got 150 people now who are members of the Kensington Running Club, because there's a lot of people in this neighborhood didn't want to go to Rockville either. Didn't want to go to, or down to, you know, Bethesda used to have one, but then they're not active. Like, we're active. We're religious. I'm a religious person. I'm religious about my running too. Every Thursday night, 6:00, rain or shine, only if there's lightning, we will not run.
Right. Well, on that point, we're going to start winding down the conversation piece tonight. So here's the last conversation for each one of you. I'm going to start with Brian. Brian, what words do you have for men in regards to getting more involved with their kids' education? I'm going to have a different question for Tachi. I'll probably have Ahmed and Brian. I'm going to have you answer that question. But also, what are your thoughts? How can the education system be better for your kids, too? If there needs to be better with their kids. I'll leave Tachi to last. Brian, what words do you have for men when it comes to the education of their children? And what words do you have for the education system?
I would say for men, you're only going to have, I've got kids that are like just finishing middle school. I got one in 8th grade. I got one in high school, and I got 2 in college. These kids are not with you for very long. When they kind of go off to high school, they're pretty much gone. Like, I have one in Purdue, football player, and he's gone. It's like, I don't see him anymore. I mean, he might text me once in a while. He comes back on vacations, but this is such a huge opportunity for men to have you're the most important person in their lives, especially as a man. And so for you you to be involved in that education system, it gives you one more way to have a real impact and make a difference in their life, because they're not going to be around forever. Time goes, as you all know, time goes quickly, and so that being involved in their education is just one more area of their life. People have all these primary areas of life, family, social, recreation. Education is a major area of their life. And so it's another way that you can tie in and make a major impact in their life so that they can, turn out to be wonderful, people. So that's my feedback for men.
Short.
Feedback.
Yeah, short for the education. Keep it short, please.
Sorry, yeah. For the education system, I would say find ways to engage, to invite men into the education process. Make it more masculine. Make it more enticing for men for men wanting to be involved. Use sports or whatever else. Do things that will draw men into the education process more organically.
Ahmed, same two conversation pieces.
I think first, what's important for men to know is that we matter, that we're important, and that our voice plays a pivotal role in guidance and direction. As far as the school system is concerned, I'm kind of on the same page with Brian. I think that if the school system simply invited men in, that more would begin to show up.
And your message for the men, did you give the one for the education system also, right?
Yes. Invite the fathers in. Have fathers night.
Okay. Brian, I might be remiss to. Do you want to give your contact information if you want at all? If you want, you can. If not, no problem. And also, you can type it on the side.
I'll type it.
Okay, Ahmed, your contact information, and also you can type it in on the side.
Okay.
And then Tashi will give the last comments to you, because you are an educator, even though it isn't at the younger grade, but you are an educator and you see the result of the education system, especially what it can do or does to especially men.
So you want me to just speak to?
I want you to give your call to action for men when it comes to getting involved in their kids' education, and are there any, and what opportunities can the education do? And that's a whole other conversation itself. What short answers can you give on how, especially in the younger grades, the education system can make it a better experience for parents and their young kids?
This is so hard. It's like trying to solve the world's problems in one day. So I would concur with what Brian and Ahmed said in terms of inviting men in. Definitely invite them in. Do something different, I think. Rather than the run-of-the-mill, same old, invite men in and invite them to be part of that conversation, part of the space. I think at the same time, though, if we're asking for people to take responsibility, don't wait to be invited. Know that this is your child, that your child is a reflection of you. And I think that's part of the thing. But if I'm looking back at my father, the famous thing in Nigerian families is you better not shame this family. So your child is a reflection of you. If they go out and act an orangutan, it's because you let them act an orangutan. So don't wait for the invitation. Be there whenever, anything is going on. Make it a point to be there. I think what also has to happen, it's not just at the school level. It's also at the societal level in terms of work. Because how many times are parents in general, but when men say that they want to take off because such and such has something, they look at men side-eye. Like, why? You're supposed to be here. Can't somebody else do that? So I think there needs to be more of a tolerant spirit, an accepting spirit of the fact that men have families that they need to attend to, take care of, spend time with as well. And there are going to be these events and these school things related that they need to be at. And so I think that the workplace needs to be more tolerant of that in general. So it's not, it goes beyond the school. It's a societal thing that needs to be fixed. And then the final thing you asked me was in terms of small things that can be done. I mean, those are part of the small things that can be done. But I think it's also, there needs to be more cooperation between the teachers and parents. I mean, they used to do the whole, big PTA thing, but I don't know how many schools really are huge on that. I know it still exists, but not like back in the day where that was the thing. So I think there needs to be more of a cooperative spirit between parents and teachers in terms of what teachers need, what parents need, and where they can meet in the middle to do things differently. That's also a thing at the school board level and at the curriculum level. What can we do in the curriculum that will engage everyone? Because, all right, children don't like to sit for a long time anyway, whether they're male or female. So what is it that we can do that is going to get them interested, that is going to get them up, that will tire them out so that there's not such a rush to get up and do things, like they did in the old days. You were too tired to cause problems because you just had a whole hour and a half of gym. So, those types of things, bringing some of those things back makes perfect sense.
And I also, Tachi, to your point earlier, I think that the school lunches are horrible and that we need to do something to change what's being fed to kids because I saw where one school went to an all vegetarian lunch and their test score skyrocketed.
All right. Well, that is it. That is another edition of the weekly Manhood Show on the Dr. Vibe Show Conversation. I'd like to thank everyone who caught this live. Their replay will be up in a week or so. I'd like to thank Brian, Tachi, Ahmed, Patrick, who was on earlier, also Evan and Leon for stopping by, Kimberly, Ava, Laura. If I've missed anybody out, my apologies. If you want to touch base, the contact information is on the side. Email address dr.vibe at dr.vibeshow.com. And certainly get on the mailing list. If you were on the mailing list, you would have got a little advance of a special guest that we're having on tomorrow night. And Brian was seen to be quite impressed with the lady we have on tomorrow night. Also, Twitter at dr.vibeshow.com and the website address www.dr.vibeshow.com. If you're on this page, keep on coming. And just a little promo tomorrow night, we have Amy Hilliard coming on the program. Her background is just all over. She's the former president of Fashion Fair Cosmetics, largest cosmetic company focused on women and color of the world. She's done work for Nielsen, IBM, American Express, HBO, the Art Institute in Chicago, Ford Motor Company, PepsiCo, and others. She also has run her own company, food cake company, too. So she's an entrepreneur. The title of our conversation tomorrow night, Entrepreneurville, Lessons from the Real World, Real Land of Oz. Amy is going to give the real deal about entrepreneurship. Some of it's nice, some of it ain't so nice. So make sure you catch us tomorrow night, same place, 9 p.m. Eastern Time for another epic conversation. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed and highly favored. You're miracles. Solution for someone's problem. Thank each one of you for making the conversation better. God bless, peace, well, keep the faith, and good night.